Once Hollywood's ultimate heartthrob, Richard Gere shocked the world by choosing love over Los Angeles, trading his $10.75 million Connecticut estate for a quiet life in Madrid, where he meditates daily, fights homelessness, and puts family dinners ahead of red carpets. This is what Richard Gere is doing now, after giving up fame. Peak of fame. Richard Tiffany Gere didn't start out planning to become one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. Born on August 31, 1949, in Philadelphia, he grew up on a farm near Syracuse, New York, where his father sold insurance and his mother worked as a homemaker. What set him apart early on wasn't his looks or charm, but his athletic ability and musical talent. In high school, Gere excelled at gymnastics to such a degree that he earned a full scholarship to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where he planned to study philosophy. But even then, the seeds of his artistic future were taking root. He played 4 different instruments and composed music for school productions, showing the creative spark that would eventually lead him away from academia and toward the stage. After 2 years in college, Gere made the bold decision to leave his scholarship behind and pursue acting full-time. His first major break came when he landed the lead role of Danny Zuko in the London production of the rock musical Grease in 1973. This early stage work taught him the fundamentals of performance and gave him his first taste of being in the spotlight. The transition from theater to film began with smaller roles in the mid-1970s, but it was his supporting performance in Looking for Mr. Goodbar in 1977 that first caught Hollywood's attention. A year later, director Terrence Malick cast him in the critically acclaimed drama Days of Heaven, which established Gere as a serious actor capable of carrying complex, artistic films. But it was 1980's American Gigolo that transformed Richard Gere from a promising young actor into a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Playing Julian Kay, a sophisticated male escort in Los Angeles, Gere brought a combination of vulnerability and magnetic confidence to the role that captivated audiences worldwide. The film's success made him an instant sex symbol and established the template for the sophisticated, morally complex characters that would define much of his career. 2 years later, An Officer and a Gentleman cemented his status as Hollywood royalty. Starring opposite Deborah Winger, Gere played Zach Mayo, a naval aviation candidate whose journey from selfish individualist to responsible man struck a chord with audiences. The film's romantic storyline and Gere's compelling performance helped it earn over $130 million at the box office and 6 Academy Award nominations. By the 1990s, Gere commanded some of the highest salaries in Hollywood. His partnership with Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman in 1990 became one of cinema's most beloved romantic comedies, while his reunion with Roberts in Runaway Bride in 1999 earned him $12 million and proved his enduring box office appeal. The peak of his artistic recognition came with 2002's Chicago, where his singing and dancing performance as lawyer Billy Flynn earned him a Golden Globe Award and showed his remarkable versatility as a performer. The breaking point. The 1993 Academy Awards ceremony was supposed to be just another glamorous Hollywood evening for Richard Gere, who had been invited to present the award for Best Art Direction. What happened instead would fundamentally alter the trajectory of his career and his relationship with the entertainment industry forever. The seeds of this moment had been planted years earlier, when Gere first discovered Buddhism in his 20s and began studying Tibetan culture during a transformative trip to Nepal in 1978. There, he met Tibetan refugees living in camps and heard first-hand accounts of the suffering they had endured under Chinese occupation since 1950. These encounters profoundly moved him. And when he later met the Dalai Lama in India, Gere became not just a practicing Tibetan Buddhist, but also a passionate advocate for Tibetan independence. By the early 1990s, Gere was using his celebrity platform to speak out about what he saw as China's systematic oppression of the Tibetan people. He had co-founded Tibet House US in 1987 and joined the board of the International Campaign for Tibet. But his activism was largely confined to specialized forums and humanitarian circles. That changed dramatically on the night of March 30th, 1993. Standing at the podium before an audience of Hollywood's elite and a global television audience estimated at 1 billion viewers, Gere was expected to simply announce the nominees and present the award. Instead, he decided to use this unprecedented platform to shine a spotlight on an issue he felt the world was ignoring. Going completely off script, he looked directly into the camera and said, "With the knowledge of what a horrendous human rights situation there is in China and Tibet, I wonder if we could all send love and truth and sanity to Deng Xiaoping right now in Beijing. If maybe he will take his troops, take them away from Tibet, and allow these people to live as free, independent people again." The reaction was immediate and severe. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences was reportedly furious about Gere's unauthorized political statement during what was supposed to be an entertainment event. More importantly, Hollywood's growing financial relationship with China meant that Gere's public condemnation of the Chinese government made him a liability for major studios who were increasingly dependent on the Chinese box office for their profits. The consequences were swift and lasting. Gere was banned from presenting at the Academy Awards for the next 20 years, effectively shutting him out of one of Hollywood's most prestigious events. But the real damage went much deeper than award show politics. As China became the world's second-largest film market, major studios began avoiding projects that might offend Chinese authorities or audiences, and Richard Gere's name became synonymous with exactly the kind of controversy they wanted to avoid. Directors and producers who had previously worked with Gere began telling him directly that they couldn't cast him in their films because it would upset Chinese investors or prevent their movies from being distributed in China. The Great Escape. Rather than fight against Hollywood's new reality, Richard Gere made a decision that would define the second half of his career. He would step away from the blockbuster machine and find meaning in smaller, more personal projects. What began as a forced exile from major studio films gradually became a deliberate choice to prioritize artistic integrity and personal fulfillment over commercial success. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Gere carved out a new identity as an independent film actor, taking on challenging roles in movies that explored complex moral questions rather than simply entertaining mass audiences. Films like The Dinner in 2017 and Norman in 2016 allowed him to work with respected directors and fellow actors who valued his craft over his box office appeal. These projects might not have commanded the $12 million paychecks of his Runaway Bride days, but they offered something more valuable to Gere at this stage of his life: the opportunity to tell stories that mattered to him. His performance in 2012's Arbitrage proved that his acting abilities had only deepened with age and experience. Playing a hedge fund billionaire whose life unravels around him, Gere delivered what many critics considered one of his finest performances, demonstrating that stepping away from Hollywood's spotlight had actually sharpened his skills rather than diminished them. But even as he found satisfaction in independent cinema, Gere was increasingly drawn to focus on his personal life and spiritual practice. His marriage to Spanish publicist Alejandra Silva in 2018 brought new responsibilities and joys, as the couple welcomed their first son Alexander in 2019 and their second son James in 2020. At the age of 70, Gere found himself raising 2 toddlers while also maintaining his relationship with his older son Homer from his previous marriage. This new chapter as a father coincided with a significant shift in his professional priorities. After appearing in the BBC television series Mother, Father, Son in 2019, where he played a powerful media mogul dealing with family crisis, Gere essentially disappeared from screens for 4 years. This wasn't due to lack of offers or health problems, but rather a conscious decision to step back and focus on what had become most important to him: his family and his spiritual growth. During this period, Gere deepened his daily meditation practice, often spending 1 to 2 hours each morning in contemplation before starting his day. He continued his humanitarian work through the Gere Foundation and his role as chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, but he was no longer willing to sacrifice time with his young children for film schedules or promotional tours. When he did return to acting with 2023's Maybe I Do, it was clear that his approach had fundamentally changed. He was now choosing projects based on personal interest rather than career advancement, working when it felt right, rather than maintaining the constant presence that Hollywood traditionally demands of its leading men. This gradual retreat from the entertainment industry reflected a man who had found something more valuable than fame or fortune in his spiritual practice and family relationships. Where are they now? Today, Richard Gere wakes up each morning not in the sprawling estates of Hollywood or the Hamptons, but in a comfortable home in Madrid, Spain, where the sounds of his young sons speaking fluent Spanish fill the air, and family dinners can stretch late into the evening with dozens of relatives gathered around a single table. The transition to this new life began in earnest in November 2024, when Gere and his wife Alejandra Silva finally completed the sale of their 32-acre Connecticut estate for $10.75 million. This wasn't just a real estate transaction, but the final step in a carefully planned relocation that had been years in the making. The couple had been visiting properties and schools in Madrid's upscale residential neighborhoods since at least 2023, preparing for a move that Gere described as fundamentally about fairness in their relationship. During his appearance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon in November 2024, Gere explained the decision with characteristic directness. "My wife is Spanish, and she gave me about 7 years here. And so, we're going to spend some years in Madrid. It's called giving back. It's called a relationship." This wasn't the impulsive decision of a Hollywood star seeking novelty, but rather the thoughtful choice of a 75-year-old man who understood that love sometimes requires geographical sacrifice. The move has brought Gere closer to Silva's extended Spanish family, something that became particularly important after the passing of Silva's grandmother about 2 years ago. Gere has watched his 41-year-old wife naturally step into the role of family matriarch, organizing elaborate Sunday lunches for up to 35 people from the extended family network. These gatherings represent everything Gere had been seeking in his later years: genuine connection, multi-generational warmth, and a sense of belonging that has nothing to do with celebrity status. Their daily routine in Madrid reflects a man who has found contentment in the ordinary rhythms of family life. 5-year-old Alexander and 4-year-old James are now fully bilingual, attending local Spanish schools and flourishing in an environment that celebrates their dual cultural heritage. Gere often spends his mornings playing guitar while Silva prepares meals, since, as she has noted with affection, cooking is not among his talents. His role as an attentive father includes reading bedtime stories to the boys, a simple pleasure that has taken on deeper significance for a man who spent decades traveling the world for film shoots. The contrast with his former lifestyle is striking. Instead of red carpet events and premiere parties, Gere now experiences the satisfaction of helping his children with their Spanish homework and participating in the kind of extended family celebrations that were largely absent from his earlier adult life. This isn't retirement in the traditional sense, but rather a conscious reshaping of priorities that puts relationship and community at the center of his daily experience. New life, new purpose. While most retired Hollywood stars spend their time playing golf or writing memoirs, Richard Gere has transformed his post-fame years into what may be the most meaningful period of his entire life, channeling his energy and resources into humanitarian causes that span 3 continents and address some of the world's most pressing social problems. At the heart of Gere's current work is his continued role as chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, a position he has held since 1995. This isn't just a ceremonial title, but an active leadership role that requires him to regularly address congressional committees, meet with world leaders, and coordinate international advocacy efforts on behalf of the Tibetan people. Through this organization, Gere has worked tirelessly to keep global attention focused on what he sees as China's ongoing cultural genocide in Tibet. Even though his activism has cost him millions in lost film opportunities over the decades, the Gere Foundation, which he established in 1991, has evolved into a sophisticated grant-giving organization that supports projects ranging from AIDS research in India to educational programs for Tibetan refugees. The foundation represents more than just charitable giving. It's become Gere's primary vehicle for translating his Buddhist values of compassion and service into concrete action that improves people's lives around the world. Since moving to Madrid, Gere and Silva have joined the board of Hogar C, a Spanish non-profit organization dedicated to ending homelessness throughout the country. This new commitment reflects their shared goal of ensuring that no one in Spain is forced to sleep on the streets within the next 5 years. For Gere, this local focus represents a natural extension of his global humanitarian work, bringing the same level of passion and commitment to addressing problems in his adopted homeland that he has long applied to international causes. Perhaps his most ambitious current project is Zala, a regenerative development initiative on Mexico's Pacific coast in the state of Jalisco, where Gere has been involved for over 10 years. This isn't a typical celebrity real estate investment, but rather an attempt to create what he calls a replicable model of regenerative development that restores the environment, includes local communities, and offers a landscape for living well. In 2023, recognizing that true sustainability requires regional thinking, Gere helped expand this vision by supporting the Sierra A Mar project, which aims to create a comprehensive plan for sustainable coastal development that brings economic prosperity to local residents while protecting the natural environment. Even his selective return to filmmaking serves a larger purpose. His recent projects, including 2024's O Canada, directed by Paul Schrader, allow him to work with directors whose artistic vision aligns with his values while generating income that supports his foundation work. This approach represents a complete inversion of traditional celebrity priorities. Instead of using humanitarian work to enhance his image, Gere now uses his remaining star power primarily as a tool to fund and promote causes that matter to him. Personal transformation. Every morning before the rest of his Madrid household awakens, Richard Gere sits in quiet meditation for at least 1 hour, and often 2 when his schedule allows, engaging in a spiritual practice that has fundamentally reshaped not just his daily routine, but his entire approach to life, relationships, and the inevitable process of aging. This transformation began in his 20s, when Gere first discovered Buddhism through transcendental meditation and later Zen practice under teacher Kyozen Joshu Sasaki. However, the pivotal moment came during his late 20s trip to Nepal, where he encountered Tibetan refugees living in camps outside Pokhara. The experience, which he has described as otherworldly yet profoundly real, opened his eyes to a form of Buddhism that emphasized both inner peace and active compassion for others' suffering. His relationship with the 14th Dalai Lama, which began in the early 1980s during a monsoon season visit to Dharamshala, India, has evolved into one of the most significant partnerships of his life. Initially meeting as a curious Hollywood actor seeking spiritual guidance, Gere now serves multiple roles in the Dalai Lama's life: devoted student, political organizer, fundraiser, and teaching sponsor. This multifaceted relationship has required him to navigate different aspects of his connection with one of the world's most recognized spiritual leaders, sometimes stumbling as he balances his roles as humble student and public advocate. The daily practice that now anchors Gere's life involves what he calls watching the mind, through various forms of meditation, including traditional sitting practice, but extending throughout his waking hours as a constant awareness of his thoughts and reactions. As he explains it, meditation has made him kinder, more compassionate, by revealing the constant mental chatter that most people never notice and teaching him to tame what Buddha called the monkey mind without destroying its essential nature. This spiritual foundation has proven particularly valuable as Gere has embraced the challenges of being an older father. At 75, raising two young children could feel overwhelming, but his Buddhist practice has given him what he describes as a healthy approach to aging and the luxury of not constantly thinking about getting older. His meditation practice has taught him to be fully present with 5-year-old Alexander and 4-year-old James, reading them bedtime stories, and helping with homework without the mental distractions that might have plagued him in his younger, more ambitious years. The philosophy that guides his daily life comes directly from the Dalai Lama's teaching that my religion is kindness, a principle that Gere has internalized to such a degree that it influences every major decision he makes, from his choice of film roles to his humanitarian work to his approach to family relationships. This isn't abstract spirituality, but practical wisdom applied to the concrete challenges of marriage, parenting, and growing older in a culture that often devalues age. Through decades of consistent practice, Gere has achieved what many spiritual seekers spend lifetimes pursuing: a genuine integration of contemplative wisdom with active engagement in the world. Rare glimpses. For someone who has largely stepped away from the Hollywood spotlight, Richard Gere's recent public appearances have offered fascinating windows into his transformed life, revealing a man who seems genuinely at peace with his choices while still willing to engage with the world when the moment feels right. His most revealing recent appearance came during a November 2024 interview on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, where Gere spoke with characteristic candor about his family's move to Madrid. Sitting relaxed in the guest chair, he explained the decision with the kind of straightforward honesty that has always marked his public statements. My wife is Spanish, and she gave me about 7 years here. And so we're going to spend some years in Madrid. It's called giving back. It's called a relationship. The interview revealed a man who had clearly thought deeply about the compromises required in marriage and was comfortable with prioritizing his family's happiness over his own professional convenience. This rare television appearance came at a particularly significant time in Gere's life, as he was simultaneously being honored with one of Spain's most prestigious cultural awards. In February 2025, the Spanish Film Academy announced that Gere would receive the Goya Internacional Award, recognizing both his extraordinary impact on the art of filmmaking and his decades of humanitarian work, particularly his unwavering advocacy for Tibetan autonomy and cultural preservation. The award citation specifically praised his deep social engagement and his work on behalf of refugees, the homeless, and human rights causes around the world. However, 2024 also brought concerning health news that rippled through the global community of Tibet supporters and Buddhist practitioners. In June, Gere underwent prostate surgery, a procedure that was complicated by an infection requiring a second operation. The news of his health struggles was revealed publicly by Sikyong Penpa Tsering, the president of the Central Tibetan Administration, during a visit to Ladakh, who asked Tibetans worldwide to pray for Gere's swift recovery and acknowledged him as a devoted ally to our cause for many years. The response to news of Gere's health challenges demonstrated the deep respect and affection he has earned through his humanitarian work. Social media platforms filled with messages of support from around the world, with Tibetan communities organizing prayer sessions for his recovery. One supporter wrote on Facebook, "I really hope he will recover well as soon as possible. He is our real friend. May Buddha bless him." Another added, "Sending from my heart streams of sincere prayers and wishes for a speedy recovery and long life. We Tibetans deeply remain grateful to you, dearest Gere. These health concerns also highlighted how Gere's life has changed in recent years. As reports indicated, he had been vacationing with his family in Portugal before the surgery, living the kind of quiet, family-centered life that would have been impossible during his Hollywood heyday. By all accounts, he has made a full recovery and continues to maintain his active lifestyle in Madrid. No regrets. When Richard Gere reflects on the path that led him from Hollywood's A-list to a quiet family life in Madrid, his assessment is remarkably simple and unambiguous. "We are happier than ever," he told El España in their first interview since relocating to Spain, adding with characteristic directness, "She because she is at home, and I because, if she is happy, I am happy." This contentment represents the culmination of choices that many in his position would have found difficult to make. Few actors would willingly sacrifice tens of millions of dollars in potential earnings to stand up for political principles, yet Gere has never expressed regret about the career consequences of his Tibet activism. When asked about the cost of his advocacy, he remains resolute in his belief that some things matter more than box office success or industry approval. His commitment to the Tibetan cause has only deepened with time, as evidenced by his continued role as chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet and his regular meetings with the Dalai Lama to coordinate advocacy efforts. The philosophy that guides Gere's approach to these choices comes directly from his spiritual teacher, the Dalai Lama, whose simple statement that "my religion is kindness" has become the organizing principle of Gere's later years. This isn't just a pleasant sentiment, but a practical framework that influences every major decision he makes, from his choice of humanitarian projects to his approach to raising his young sons. The principle has helped him navigate the transition from a life focused on personal achievement to one centered on service to others and devotion to family. At 75, Gere has discovered that stepping away from conventional measures of success has paradoxically led to a richer and more satisfying existence than his peak fame years ever provided. His daily routine now revolves around meditation practice, time with Alexander and James, collaborative work with Silva on their humanitarian projects, and the simple pleasures of extended family gatherings that can stretch for hours around a Spanish dinner table. These experiences offer rewards that no amount of movie star acclaim could match. Perhaps most significantly, Gere has found peace with the aging process in a culture that often treats growing older as a form of failure. His Buddhist practice has taught him to view each stage of life as having its own purpose and possibilities, allowing him to embrace being an older father rather than lamenting lost youth. He speaks of watching his sons learn Spanish with the same enthusiasm he once brought to preparing for film roles, finding genuine joy in ordinary parental moments that his earlier career would have prevented him from fully experiencing. Looking back on his journey from sex symbol to spiritual seeker to devoted family man, Gere represents something increasingly rare in celebrity culture. Someone who successfully redefined success on his own terms and found genuine fulfillment in the process. His story suggests that sometimes the greatest achievement isn't reaching the top of your profession, but knowing when and how to step away from it in service of something more meaningful.